Okay, hello you beautiful people. It has been a minute since we talked about JASMY Coin, but I would argue what we talked about in the previous video about, I think it was 20 days back, basically sort of kind of played out. Why? Because if you remember the last time that we talked about JASMY, I believe we were exactly around this area, and the idea was that for two reasons we can argue our move down is going to begin soon. Reason number one, if you remember, came down to classic technical analysis, meaning support and resistances, and the fact that in here we had a major resistance area and made perfect sense for us, at least by the first time that we are going to touch it, we are going to have a decent reaction, maybe even an outright rejection from it. So this was reason number one for why we said, yeah, you know what, we may go down a bit sooner than you think. Reason number two, if you remember, came down to Elliott Waves. You see, in terms of Elliott Waves, if you want to argue that we're going to have our final low around here, then okay, you need to be able to find off of the lowest low a 5-wave up. This specific scenario is called an impulse. Rules for it are, we should not have overlapping of the waves between our wave 2 and 4, and in any kind of 5-wave, our wave 3 in here should not be the smallest wave, and for the sub waves, there we go. 5-wave up into wave 1, 3, and 5. And for our corrections, we can consider different possibilities. The shape of it doesn't necessarily matter. Let's say, sure, ABC for 4 followed by like a WXY into wave 2. Now, here's a very important point. If you're able to find a 5-wave off of the lows, it is definitely one, I would argue, even massive step towards the bullish direction. However, right around the highs, it's very important to understand that by any means is not actually a buy opportunity. Why is that? Okay, let's say we are actually having a correction structure in this area. In that case, yeah, okay, fair enough. Maybe this is a 5-wave, but like we also, I believe, talked about it in the previous video as well, this can be maybe into a larger degree wave C, completing the subwaves for possibly an ABC expanded flat structure, meaning what? From the highs that we said is not a buy opportunity, we are going to have actually a massive move down in order to take the loss. Scenario number two suggests that this is actually bullish and the final low is already in. Well, okay, here's a deal for you. For those of you who are new viewers, you should understand that after completing a 5-wave, even according to the most bullish case, what are we going to have? Yep, a move on the downside. But here is the really key point, and what we are actually going to talk about in today's update. That move down that we are going to get should actually have certain characteristics. Chief among them is being slow and choppy, meaning timing wise this is actually going to take a considerable amount of time, and also between our pullbacks up in here, there we go, this one, and this one, we must be able to find constantly overlapping of the waves. That, my friends, was the very reason for why around the highs in JASMY, if I just go on the live chart so you can see the structure is a bit better, there we go. Excuse me, what just happened? Okay, let's just go in here. That's why around the highs we argued, look, it seems like that we have completed the subwaves for a 5-wave up, and now one way or the other, it is time for a move on the downside. And we said in terms of the target, bare minimum one, again, bare minimum one can be around this yellow region right in here. What was this? Do you remember it? This was actually a gap that was created as a result of this move up in JASMY happening way too fast, and I do think that gaps 95+% of the time are going to get filled. So that's why I said, yeah, you know what, this is the beginning of our move down, and odds are at least we are going to continue our move in order to get to here, and maybe we're going to go a bit lower. And as you can see, well, unfortunately we did end up going a bit lower, but that's not really our main concern. You see, my main concern in JASMY at the moment comes down to the shape of this move, because yes, fair enough, you are able to argue that this move is taking a bit of time, and let's actually measure it from here and not this high. How long is it taking for us to have this thing? About, let's say, 510 candlesticks on H1 time frame. On the other hand, this move up in JASMY took us about 175 candlesticks. So in this massive move on the downside, despite having way more than enough time, about, I would argue, 3 times more, we actually failed to completely cover this move on the upside. So technically, again, technically you might be able to argue that bulls do actually have a bit of power in here, or at least bears are not necessarily that strong. However, do you remember what we said earlier? One other characteristic of a correction structure is the fact that you should actually be able to find between your pullbacks up constant overlapping of the waves, and that, well, it's actually exactly what worries me in JASMY. You see, between this pullback and then this one and then this one, and also these ones, as you can see, we really do not have a whole lot of overlapping of the waves, do we? Well, that's unfortunately a characteristic of an impulsive structure, and I'm not going to say this is like with 100% certainty an impulse down and we are actually looking bearish. No, there is no certainty in any market. It's very important to understand that. At any given moment, we are just talking about different possibilities, but I would argue this could potentially be enough of a reason for me to maybe not necessarily be overwhelmingly optimistic. So the question is, what should we do right now? In my view, we should actually be a little bit more patient and see a decent pullback on the upside. And I do think one way or the other, we are going to have this pullback. Why is that? Okay, let's even go according to the most pessimistic scenario, suggesting this is an impulse, and he asked me, we are not actually bullish. Okay, in that case, this can be 1, 2, probably like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down into wave 3 correction for another move down into wave 5. And so, as you can see, we are getting close to the end of this 5 wave on the downside. And what's going to happen after it? Well, we just said it earlier, we are going to have a move on the opposite direction. And in this case, it is going to be a pullback up. And again, pay attention, this was the most pessimistic scenario. Now, if you want to be a little bit optimistic, in JASMY, you can argue that on a higher degree, this is 5 up into a wave 1. This is correction for wave 2. And well, according to this, what's next? You know it. Like a very, very strong move up into our wave 3 and 4 and 5. And again, it's very important to understand that wave 3, in a lot of the cases, not necessarily all of them, but in most cases, is actually quite a strong and sharp move on the upside. So this optimistic scenario also suggests that soon in JASMY, we are going to have a bit of a move. Now, here's a very important point. When we get our move up, I actually need you to pay full attention to the shape of our move, okay? Because that, in my view, is going to really, really determine what is coming in JASMY Coin. In case we end up having a very strong move in form of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 without a lot of overlapping of the waves, that, my friends, is going to be an awesome sign suggesting hopefully the bottom is in and you can actually start looking for some decent long, potentially even, who knows, maybe buy opportunities for the mid to long term. On the other hand, if we end up having again a very slow and choppy pullback, unfortunately that's a sign of a correction, suggesting after this move is over, we are actually going to end up getting another move down in order to once more take the lows and maybe even visit the lower band of this region about, let's say, 0.46 of a cent. Overall, do not get me wrong, I'm absolutely bullish and I am going to tell you in a minute why. But in the short term, the structures in here, in my view, can be a little bit off for the base. And by the way, I forgot to tell you this, you see. Right in here in JASMY at least, I don't really see a whole lot of supports in the short term. So I'm going to argue maybe our move down is going to continue for another, let's say minimum like 5 to 10% in order to get to about preferably this very important region. And then I think our pullback phase on the upside hopefully is going to start, and maybe it's not going to be a pullback according to the most bullish case. It is going to be a very, very strong bounce back, which will be awesome for those of us who bought JASMY right around the lows. But for now, again, let's just be patient because this, in my view, is a bit of a waiting game. Now, my final reason for why overall I'm talking about JASMY Coin a lot. You see, I told you in the previous videos as well. Overall, in JASMY, I'm actually quite optimistic. And I would like to say that Elliott Wave wise, we do have from the lows in here back around January of 2023, a 5 wave up into 1, correction for 2, big 5 wave up into wave 3, correction for 4, another move up into wave 5, followed by that, this is most likely a correction as structure on the downside, maybe ABC or maybe a WXY. The shape of it doesn't really matter. My point is this is actually a correction, and as long as we are staying above this important support, we could argue, even according to the most pessimistic possibility, we are having just an ABC. And guess what? Even this thing suggests, okay, this is 5 up into A, this is correction for wave B, and well, as we can see, we still haven't completed our C leg yet. So makes sense to argue in the mid to long term. Okay, what we are talking about right now is not necessarily about the short-term price action. In the mid to long term, however, we can argue it makes perfect sense to expect yet another good move up alongside other altcoins. Okay, I do not expect JASMY to go up and have a gigantic bull run by itself. That, in my view, is simply not realistic, or let's just say this, the odds of it happening are so little to a degree that it really shouldn't be anybody's base case. When JASMY Coin is going to go up big time, all the other altcoins most likely are going to go up as well, and hopefully by the end of this cycle, we are going to end up making a good bit of money. And I hope I explained everything well and you understood what is going on in JASMY, and until the next update, I hope you have a wonderful time. Goodbye.